Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I've got a lot to tell you, so I better get going. I better tell you a little bit about my early days so you appreciate where I come from. So I started work on the family property just west of Clermont in late 80 and late 68. And we went through then. I was the youngest of a family of 7, 2 girls, 5 boys. By the time 1970 come along, my 2 older brothers had married, and the 2 older daughters had also married and left the property. Well, 3 brothers had married, and that left my brother Noel and I at home with my father. And they had bought lots of property in the 50s and 60s. They seemed to be able to buy properties and pay them off. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. And then in the 70s, the brothers went to the other properties, left us a little bit smaller again. And in 73, my brother and I bought our first 20,000 acre block. Our father, we had a bit of money saved up, and then we got a mortgage and he guaranteed us. And then in 74, the cattle slump come, and I think we had maiden spade heifers go from about $2.60 from memory to $30 in 3 weeks. So that takes a little bit of weathering. So by 75, in those days you got a loan at the bank, and we had to pay principal interest, and it was 8% back then. So I went and got a job in the mine, and the Saraji mine at Dysart was just opening, and I got there very early. And when I went over for the interview, I just tell you, this is just a bit interesting. When I went for the interview, I went into this room, and there was 5 or 6 other people off the land my age that were forced out, same as I was, looking for a job, and there was probably 20 of us. I went into this room, and there wasn't a chair. I thought that was a bit unusual, and they just said, sit round the wall. So I sat on the floor around the wall, and this personnel officer would come out, and he'd walk around with a notebook. He wouldn't say anything. He'd just look and say, oh, you, come on in, sir. I go in, and he said, what a bit about your history? And I told him where I come from. He said, what sort of machine you got in the place? I said, well, the biggest earth mover we got's a square nose shovel, and then a crowbar and a shovel, and a chainsaw that sometimes starts and sometimes doesn't. Anyway, he asked me a couple more questions, and he said, I've got a job for you, and told me what it was, and it was just what I wanted. It was driving a truck with a high-ab on, carting gear to fitters and boilermakers, and then working at the wash plant and the workshops. And you had to go on to day shift for a while to get to learn the run of the show. And it wasn't long they put me on the shift work, and in those days it was 3 shifts of 8 hours, 3 8-hour shifts. And that's and you could get so much overtime, and it was absolutely brilliant. And I could work 16 hours straight, come back, have 8 hours off, come back in, and made quite a bit of money. But I got to know the personnel officer really well, and eventually I got married while I was there. I was there about 5 years, and he gave me a good house in town. And then come back payday time, and he said, I got some kids and pony club, and the horses were out of control, so I went and helped him there, but that was good. So when I got to know him, I just said, why? How did you pick me? Why would you give me a job when I had absolutely no experience? And I said, why'd we have to sit on the floor? He said, I just come out, and if anyone had cow shit in their boots, I give them a job. So I'm not off to a real good qualification for a job. Just a bit of cow shit, and we're away. And thanks to the square nose shovel, I suppose. But anyway, while I was there, for the bit of time I was there, we paid the place off and had enough money to build a house on the property, went back to Hillview, and I've been there ever since. I just keep notes here because my memory's shocking, and I wrote a few things coming up on the way up this morning. So then I went home in 79, late 79, and in the early 80s, I had a brother die of lung cancer, so I had to go and work on that place. And then I got a father die of lung cancer, and it was pretty traumatic. But then in the late 80s, my brother and I bought another place, and then in 92, we branched out and bought a really big place, and it was a lot of money, all borrowed. And we just come out of a cattle slump and spent through 18% interest, and everyone was a bit gun shy, but we thought we'd give it a crack. And we went to a handful of banks and finished up with Suncorp in Emerald, which would loan us the money to buy this place. And there was an up-and-coming bank manager there called Ian McGibbon. We got on really well, and we borrowed the money, bought the place, and we go along. And a few years later, we probably bought another place in a partnership with another fella. And even for a while, we had Barnaby Joyce as our bank manager, and that was interesting. He was full bore then, just like he is now. And but this Ian McGibbon rang one day and he said, I just see the Rabo Bank thing here, and I just reminded me. And Ian rang up one day and he said, we're starting a new bank called Rabo Bank. We're all going across to it. Will you come? And I said, I'll go anywhere you go. And yeah, been with them ever since. Brilliant bank, absolutely brilliant bank. Seen us right through all the borrowed money. We've paid that back now, and yeah, going good, but still with them. We probably not as worth as much as we used to be when we were paying a lot of interest, but they're still with us and still look after us. So whatever they're doing here, whether they're sponsoring or not, they're a good bank. So we've always had, since 1970, always had high grade Brahman cows. So 72 years of breeding. And then, somewhere about the late 80s, we started a bit of crossbreeding, and we tried everything I think you'd think of. Right up till 2007, and we bought a Simmental bull. And that was just what we wanted over the high-grade Brahmins. And then by accident, we also found they cross very well over drought masters. So how we run the show now, we have 8 paddocks of breeders. There might be about 600 of them are Brahmins that have Brahman bulls to them. That's to keep a good base of Brahmins. And then there's another 500 that have Simmentals, and we've got 100 drought masters with Simmentals over them. They're absolutely brilliant, but we've got to buy the drought masters in because they're not self-replacing. So that's why we buy young heifers in and replace and keep that 100, 120. And now we've gone to crossing a Simmental over a first cross Brahman Simmental heifer, a Simbra, and it's working well. We do pretty well with we show at the Clermont show, and we show at the Beef Expo, and we do well with that cross, and they're just a lovely cattle to have. We're probably a bit different. We had tried taking the bulls out, but we leave the bulls in all the time now, and we only run 2% bulls, whether it be Brahmins or Simmentals. And as I say, we've got 8 paddocks, and 2 of the paddocks are in very rough range country. So we leave that set grazing and not overstocked, and feed them supplements, and things work well there. In the better paddock, in the better country, they have 2 to 3 paddocks that they rotate around, and the biggest herd there might be 250, and the rest a couple of hundred. And we every time we move, we do a brand and a wean. And the dogs allow us to do that, and I do the mustering, and the son, and I run the show. And sometimes, because I don't like branding and trying to hold a Simmental down, we get a bit of help to do the branding. So I bring the cattle in, they draft and brand, and then I take them away and bring them another lot in, and that's kind of how it works. It might sound a lot of mustering, but I like mustering, and mustering's easy because of the dog factor. So that's how we do it, and we sell the first cross heifers as vealers. So that gives us, like, probably nearly every sale, probably, well, always once a month, we would have a couple of pens of heifers. And we only keep the very tops out of them for breeders. And of course, we keep all the steers and we finish them. But we have blade plough country and pelleted country, and we try to keep those steers going on a rising plane as quickly as we can. And then we have farming country where they'll go on to forage sorghum, oats or barley, preferably barley. If we get winter rain, and we've had a pretty good run of that. We've been doing that for about 20 years, and that's successful. And that's dropped our bullocks back to about 12 months. It could even be as adventurous to say 2 years from back in the early days when they might have been 4-year-old. Now back to a bit over 2-year-old, and we normally go to about 330 dressed weight, 335, something like that. And if it's over that, well, that's a bonus. But And we're selling all the time. If we've gone on forage sorghum, every couple of weeks we'll muster and take a deck off, muster, take a deck off. Just keep taking the tops off, and that just makes so much difference back home then, that we can keep bringing the forward steers onto forage and run less cattle on our steer, or what used to be our bullock country. The steers grow quicker, so that's one of the secrets we've learned. And back to the rotation. as I say, every time we bring them through the yard, they go to a fresh paddock. And it might only be 2 or 3 paddocks, then when they go back into the next one. And we will, just as a rough guide, we'd never let our grass get below 1/3 of its natural height, which has been an old thing that the DPI back in the early days had recommended. So we tried to do that, and we've got a lot of buffel and improved pastures and legumes and stuff growing, and we seem to handle that all right. So then, when we bought this place in 92, my brother and his wife, and he'd had some kids by then, they left Hillview, and that left me. With about 3,000 head of cattle and 70,000 acres, something like that. And then I had 2 daughters who were still in high school in Clermont, so they worked on the weekends, they worked on holidays, and sometimes during the week if I needed them. Because I always had a saying that you never let schooling interfere with the education of your children. So if I thought I could teach them to brand a calf or something like that, I'd pull them out of school for the day. So that's kind of how we did it until we could afford some help. And then, of course, the girls left school, and then I had a son come on, and so everything's fine. But because the girls were helping me and they couldn't go, when they finished high school, they couldn't go to ag college because I need them. We started to bring the ag college to us because back in my dad's day, there was no training. Like, you just went to work, there's a horse, break him in, nobody showed you. You couldn't cut a calf, you couldn't do anything till you're about 30. So we never got to learn anything. And that's how I learned that training was so important. So we would bring Lachlan Hornery used to come a lot. Horsemanship, shearing skills, butchering skills, ag and vet chemical courses. Anything that somebody could put up, what sort of course it might be, we would have it there, 2 or 3 day course. And we soon realised how important it was because we're always getting 30 or 40 people coming to these schools, young people, and thoroughly enjoying it. So, and I think I learned to learn when I worked at the mine because everyone wanted to teach me. When I went to the mine to work, boilermakers took me over the wing, taught me to weld, and fellas taught me how to change engines and bearings and all these things that I'd never seen before, and the massive trucks to drive and operate machinery. It was a little bit different world, and then in those days, especially when you got onto night shift, they'd teach me all this stuff so I could do it while if they'd played football, they could go and camp in the rag bag and I'd keep the show going. But that suited me fine. I was a fitter without a trade, and I was a driver without a ticket, and I did cause a strike once because I drove a truck that I shouldn't have, and yeah, but that's all right. We got through that, but that gave me the desire for training. So what we would do then is have these trainers come in, and then we got the idea in the mid-90s of taking school-based trainees. Oh, and that's absolutely brilliant. But we're lucky. We're only 17 k's or 20 k's from Clermont. Absolutely brilliant. They could come out for one day, and then the school was good to us. They would let us have them on a Friday or a Monday, which meant that they could work the weekend plus the day, and then work on the holidays. And then if we had troublesome kids at the school, they would send us to us for 2 days, and that was just like a work experience thing. And they would, if the kid played up at school, then he wasn't allowed to come out. So that was his enticement to be good, that he could come out for the day or the couple of days or whatever it was. So we've done a lot of that along the way. And it's great to see how kids that are in trouble at school and rebel in grade 10 to want to leave, to not go on, and they cause trouble at school. The best place is out on a crowbar and learn things, and then they see things in a different light. Because if some kids haven't learned by grade 10, they're not going to learn by grade 12. They'll get themselves into trouble. So we've done that a bit along the way, not a lot, and but we have, and I probably think we've put about 14 school-based trainees through. Some of them have done level 3, some of them, well, they've all done level 3, and some of them, about 5 or 6 of them, my daughter and son, and that have all gone through to a level 4 in agriculture. But I did, when my son Scott come along, I sent him, he was heart was set on machinery, so I sent him with a fella to get a, what do you call it, a certificate in civil construction. And then he come home and he looks after all the machinery now and looks after it properly. And we have advanced from a square no shovel. We've got, a lot of yellow stuff sitting around, but it's there. And I don't know a lot about it, but he does. So, and then anyway, after in these schools, I'd ask the young people what they want to do next. And 95, it was overwhelming for a dog school. So always sourced good dog trainers. And a dog school, who trains dogs? And in the Clermont area in those days, there was nobody anywhere. So I got Neil and Helen McDonald from South Australia. I found them and rang them, and luckily they were coming up to the South Queensland areas there to do some schools. And they came up and they got to Hillview about 4 days before the school, and I had no idea what we needed. So we got about 380 weaners in when we only needed about 20, but we got these weaners in. And he got there and he's seen all these weaners and they were flying around the yard. And he said, "What do you normally do?" And I said, "Oh, we feed them loose and or feed a bit of hay for so many days. When we get game enough, we let them out on the horse. If we pull them up good, and if we can't, we pull them up a bit further away. And things go on." He said, "Well, I could show you another way." And they broke them up into little bits and done this thing in the quarter bubble. And then Helen would be outside and she'd have 20, next thing she had 40, next thing she had 100, next thing she had 200, next thing she had the 300, and they were just walking along behind her. And that's, I thought, well, I want to do that. And Neil used to call me the rooster. He said I didn't get it quickly, but I had to scratch for everything I got. But yeah, after 20 years, I got there. But anyhow, we bought a pup off them. Or my daughter bought a pup, and then I bought another daughter a pup, and then eventually I got one. But he put us 12 months ahead because we had 380 weaners broken in, and we had 6 or 5 little trainer mob that he does the school with. So we would throw this little pup out, he'd walk it to water, leave the cattle in water overnight or feed, throw the pup out, and he'd walk it back to food. And the trainers were just doing it, and the pup was bringing it. And that's how we got our start. And then I got hooked on running schools for dogs. So we had Neil McDonald, we had Greg Prince, we had Jim Lindsay, we had Tony McCallum. We went and done a Bud Williams school, but we were just hosting schools. It's all right to have 20 people, 30 people turn up for a 3-day school that have never done anything much with dogs and hear all the information. Then the professionals are gone. What do you do then? Well, we used to invite them back, and we started to build facilities, big pup-proof yards and small pup-proof yards and draft yard and a loading ramp and everything just for training. And we bring all our weaners, even from a property 80 k's away, all trucked back to there, and we train them there. And we spend a lot of we used to spend a lot of time training the weaners, but as your breeders get quieter, everything settles down to dogs. Your weaners are nearly trained coming in each time you come to the yard. And the biggest secret we've had is when you come to a yard with any cattle is to have a entry gate and an exit gate. And if you're on your own, that is just so simple. You never try to yard up in a gate that you keep letting cattle out of, because you can run into trouble in the early days until you get real good dogs. I don't have real good dogs, so I use a lot of craft, a lot of trickery. And it's trickery that got me through muster dogs. It wasn't skill, it was just you learn all tricks. And to have an education program on your weaners or on cattle needs to have the dogs bringing to. You must have the dogs bringing to the handler. To get cattle to completely surrender, or to get livestock to completely surrender, there needs to be a central point where the dogs learn to tuck into, and that is you. And you're walking in the lead. Once you get a bit of a handle on some dogs and the dogs are behind, then they tuck them in, come up the side. You're walking, you're on a bike, you're on a horse, two-wheeler, four-wheeler, buggy, whatever you want. Bikes are good because it gives a reference point to the noise. And they tuck the sides in. If a beach runs past you, a good dog will go around and bring it back and just keep tucking it in. If you do that, then that takes away all the rogue elements, the breakaways and the spills. If you want to get to a better patch then with your dogs, you need, or with your cattle, you need to have cattle that walk straight. You need to have cattle that start easy, stop easy, and walk straight. And you get that, once again, by being in the lead. You're out the lead of the stock. You can control the speed and the destination of the mob, and the dogs are tucking in. That way, dogs learn to tuck cattle in, cattle learn to be tucked in, and then that stops all the spills. And the more you can just drive cattle straight, you'll break them in. There's a lot of flash hairy ways of doing things, but that's the easiest. Get the dogs bringing to, learning to tuck in and bring cattle to. If they run past, they block and bring them back. And we just do that with our weaners. But I say we don't have to do that so much now that the weaners and the cattle, everything's under control. And we also put them in the yard, tie the dogs up, walk them around a fence, through, into a corner, and then along another fence. And we have a portable panel, a couple of portable panels come out off the fence and then run parallel with the fence. It's like an open-ended truck, like a 40-foot deck sort of thing. It'll hold about 25 weaners. And we'll walk them around and put them in there, then walk away. And every time they go to come back out, just keep tucking them back in until they stay in there for 5 minutes, then turn them out and bring another lot in. So that's part of what we do. And then, so then along came muster dogs, and we were given the pup, of course, as you've seen that. And I had this little bitch, and I would take her to goats, sheep every day. And at 3 months and 1 week, the instincts come out and she fired up and went round the other side. So our training was on, and we trained in a small round yard with 4 goats. Must have a rake, and you just get the little pup to go around there, block it at 9 o'clock, block it at 3 o'clock, and then learn to walk in the lead. If the pups are putting pressure on the tail and the goats want to come, you've got to give them a lead, and the same with cattle. Then we get a rake and hover it over it and make it sit. So her training would have only been probably 2 minutes every second day. It was short, little, quick segments. And for anyone wanting to train pups, remember this: you've got a small pup, so you want a small area to train it in, a small yard. You want small livestock, and you can do it with very small weaners. You don't need to have goats and sheep. It's only when you're training them really young, and I couldn't have Annie have a neck broken. So you know, if you get real small weaners, and as you're picking your weaners, try and, if you want to train a mob, and they have 5 is a good mob, so you try and find your quiet ones and try and find ones that lead. Watch the ones that want to go through the gates first, so get them off so they'll lead, and get that little pup out there. And you've got to have the rake, and if your pup's too fast, you just get the rake out and just push it. Never hit it with it. It's only there to guide the dog and to avoid confusion. But getting back to that, you've got your small yard, small livestock and a small number of livestock for a small amount of time. And that's the most important thing. When you put that little pup out, and I know you want to keep going, but you put it out and its instincts come out, it goes around the other side of the mob and it wants to bring them to you. That's just the wolves in the wild. That's it. They've evolved from the wolves. So that's their natural instinct, is our opposite. And if you get a little pup and want to drove with it like a heeler, that little pup can't work out for the life of it why you are driving its feet away from it. Because the wolves in the wild, they round the antelope, bring them in, circle them and kill them. And that's how they're hardwired. And I don't know if some of you use dogs and you go to cast dogs, if you want to cast them out that way around cattle and they get out there and cross over on you, if you check, if they do that, the wind will be coming from that way because they want to approach the livestock from downwind, and that's how the wolves work. So don't rouse on them, don't roar at them, just shut a blind eye and shake your head, yeah, righto. But if you're showing off and want to cast the dog, the wind's coming from there, there's a mob of cattle out there, I'd cast it that way and away to go. If I sent it that way, a real good dog would go around there when he'd think I wasn't watching, he'd cut across in front of me. That's what we call crossing over and can't have it. But that's why they do it. It's the wolves in the wild. Once muster dogs finished, we had all these phone calls of people wanting help. And people turning up wanting help, and it takes just as much to train one as it does 20. So we started to run, Scott and I started to run some schools. So put a little bit of an ad on Facebook, pup starting dog course, something. 1 day, we thought we'd do 1 day. That won't interfere with what we've got to do, 1 day in the weekend. And we went mustering the next day. We have rough country. And you only get service on top of the hills and some of it. You know, I'd get to a hill and all these messages, I'd take a few, yeah, dog school Saturday, yep, that's all good. Scott would do the same. When we got together again, we had 49 for a 15-head school. So we're still trying to catch up. We've held our 5th school tomorrow as our 6th school, but once again, we're always asking for input. So the first school, we'd say to people, here's a little book. Any comments? Tell us what you think we should do. And they all said, it should be 2 days. So we've gone to 2 days now. So we do another one tomorrow. And I think we've got 23 or 4 tomorrow. But we try cut it off at 15, but I'm a bit kind-hearted. People ring up and say, yeah, ask me your room, and yeah. But we handle it, and we start with the little pup section. And what we try to do is make dog training simple, and it is simple. People try to make it hard. It's not hard. It's simple, and that's what we do. We run these 2 days, and we'll do that until we're booked up until August, I think, and we'll keep running them until the demand drops. But we thoroughly enjoy it. Probably don't have the time. Oh, well, we do. We make time. You make time to do things you want to do. So we do it and enjoy having people. And that's about it. Thank you.